Okay, and I'm going to start letting some of the speakers in as you are ready.
All right, good evening and welcome to the March 15th meeting of the City of Charleston's Design Review Board. My name is Erica Chase, the board's chairperson. The members of the board with us tonight are Dinos Leolio, Kristen Krause, Aaron Stevens, Andy Smith, and I believe Jeff Johnston will be joining us if he already has not yet. Members of city staff are present are David Meeks and Andrea DeRungs. We do not have any items that have been deferred, and Aaron Stevens is recused from agenda item number 1. The order of the meeting will be as follows. David will give an introduction for any new projects. Then the applicant will make the project presentation. We do limit those to 10 minutes with a little bit of flexibility since we're virtual. But if any applicant needs time well beyond 10 minutes, if you could please let us know at the start of your presentation. All presenters should also clearly state their name for the record, along with any other persons affiliated with the project. We will then have time for board questions and then public comments. The public comment period will be limited to either 10 minutes or whatever time the applicant takes for the project presentation if it's time beyond 10 minutes. For all of the members of the public that will be speaking, please clearly state your name and address for the record. Then the public comment period will be closed and David will give city staff recommendations. Then the applicant team may respond or clarify to any of the public comments or city staff comments, which we have a 5-minute time limit for this. We will then enter into board discussion and a motion. The applicant and team may only speak if asked a question by the board or to clarify only inaccurate information that's being stated. If you could please turn off or silence all cell phones. And I do want to remind everyone that comments from the public are limited to site design and architecture only. We do not have authority over zoning issues such as land use, building density, flooding, or traffic. So with that, we'll get started with the virtual meeting protocol. And these are just items specific to holding the Zoom meetings that we are currently still ongoing in. David will be controlling the PowerPoint presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. Applicants will need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Video and microphones have been disabled for all attendees, and attendees will only be given the capabilities to speak when they are called on during the public comment period. The chat and Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. With regard to the public comment period, applicants and the public have been required to register and indicate the project they wish to comment on and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as an in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of a public meeting format. And if you have registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you will need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called in order by project. Members of the public that speak are encouraged to remain in the meeting for the completion of the item they have commented on. Staff will call the registered members of the public to speak for each project, and unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. If a board member needs to be recused from an item, they will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. Staff will issue meeting results, including staff comments and board motions to the applicant following the meeting. Results will also be posted on the city website listed on the screen, and there's additional contact information and an additional website for further information. And I do want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. So with that, we will get started with agenda item number 1, which is 829 St. Andrews requesting conceptual approval for a 2 to 5 story mixed use residential development.
Thank you, Erica. I don't, since we've seen this project before, I didn't have any introduction for this as far as context. So I'll turn it over to Michael Harper. It's going to be the first speaker. Michael, you're on mute.
Sorry, you'd think I'd know how to operate that by now. Good to see everybody. It's Michael Harper with Grambling Brothers, and we are here to present 829 St. Andrews Boulevard, which is a mixed-use project that we've been working on for some time on St. Andrews Boulevard. I'll obviously turn it over to Nathan Schutte and Tony Woody here in just a minute, but just wanted to make a couple of introductory comments. We've been obviously excited about this project for a long time and still are. And here we are now, I believe our third appearance in front of the board. We've really gone back to the drawing board based on our last hearing, which I'll tell you, we felt like during our last hearing, we were pretty excited about what we were presenting. We felt like we had a lot of support from neighborhoods and city staff and the West Ashley Commission, but the hearing didn't go so well for us last time. You know, I think the big focus was on building density, which I think is a little odd, but obviously one of the big comments from the board last time was just, I think the overall massing on St. Andrews Boulevard. So we went back, we studied our architectural design, we studied our building density, and we've come up with some new, we feel like some new direction here. And we're even more excited about it this time around. We have given up a considerable amount of square footage on St. Andrews Boulevard in order to, as we feel, maybe fit in the context of St. Andrews a little better, per the board's comments last time. And, you know, we've given that density up, I think, in an effort to really present a really good streetscape and front door to the project. That obviously comes at a pretty significant cost when you're trying to make a project work. But that being said, we've always striven to develop more than we have to. We know our buildings will be there for a long time, and we want something we'll be proud of, and our kids will be proud of, and the city will be proud of. So we're here, and with that, I will turn it over to Nathan, and we hope y'all are as excited about it as we are.
Thank you, Michael. Nathan Schutte with McMillan, Paston Smith. Madam Chair, I do wish to request some additional time. There's a lot of information contained in this presentation, and I will do my best to keep it efficient, but some consideration for a little additional time would be appreciated.
Okay.
As Michael suggested, the board challenged us at our last presentation to build upon the spirit of West Ashley, really re-envision how the project embraces St. Andrews and refine the positive direction the architecture along Ackerman Park was starting to present. David, if you'd go to the next slide, please. West Ashley neighborhoods form really the body of the community. Their varied styles and diversity coalesce into a really unique place. Amidst them are these wonderful little celebrations, these moments of gathering, accentuated by little collections of retail and activity and brilliant displays of uniqueness. And here we are on St. Andrews, really not more than a mile into West Ashley. Next slide, please. So this particular site has been designed to contribute to this community and to Ackerman Park, framing and embracing the park, and really infusing new energy into St. Andrews Boulevard, ultimately contributing itself back to sort of that wonderful sense of discovery that manages to find itself and present itself throughout the context of West Ashley. I want to go to the next slide, please. The basic organization of the project really hasn't changed. We have our frontage on St. Andrews. We have this wonderful amenity in Ackerman Park, and I say amenity, community amenity in Ackerman Park. We've kept the retail along the front, shaped the building to open to and break down its scale as it reaches and extends back to the park, and really build Chase Street into a future streetscape appropriate to West Ashley. Next slide, please. Again, at the front of the site along St. Andrews, we have preserved our retail, actually expanded it to just over 11,000 square feet of retail along the boulevard. The project transitions down Chase Street, introducing the residential component of it, with residences along the first floor. we'll see more detail on that. But the streetscape and the relationship of the ground level residences to Chase Street and ultimately to the park evolve over this stretch. The entrance, the main entrance to the residential and the amenities of the residential are still centered within, all of which wrap a parking structure, who, as you'll see in a minute's presence to the south, has been further diminished as the design has evolved. Next slide, please. The upper levels are still all residential with one exception. We won't see it here in plan, but you'll see it on the next slide, and that's the introduction of a rooftop extension of the ground floor activity space. So this north approach has changed quite dramatically from the previous scheme. We've brought it down a story, introduced a rooftop activity, and really opened both physically and visually the experience of the ground out to the street and the different dispositions of the street, layering the street trees to St. Andrews and the on-street parking, as well as to the north, and we'll see more on this later, to the parking area, and really what will be the approach for many of the visitors to this site to the project. Next slide, please. These are a couple of more detailed shots of the way the project has really transformed its scale and its shape. We have preserved the central or the more core retail courtyard and the way that frames and manifests itself. And we've further reduced the scale of the form, now only 2 stories, kind of in the distant view of this perspective, again, from the northern approach. Next slide, David. Celebrating this courtyard, we've introduced a softer material. The material palette now includes the more residential vocabulary from the park, the siding, which composes itself or brings itself now to St. Andrews, in essence, as a background. The 2 primary forms, the 2-story form to the south or the left here adjacent to the bridal shop in brick, and then the form to the right we saw in the north approach, also done in brick. But in the middle here, we have this little pocket that we're cladding in wood, a natural material, something to contrast against the sort of firmness and boldness of the masonry, but do it in a soft and more tactile way in the composition. Go to the next slide. As well, we've striven to further diminish the presence of the parking structure, allowing more of the residential vocabulary of the siding and the lighter, softer materials to return further, but also introduce a layering inclusive of some screens and an opportunity to sort of find, and as I mentioned, to discover some imagery within the community. We've kind of gone out of our way to make a point of it. This is not the imagery. We haven't designed it yet. We don't expect this to have a cow on it, but it is a fascinating place for us to grab some of the spirit, maybe the history of the neighborhood, or potentially even celebrate the future generation of the park and the farmers market that exists in Ackerman Park along the way. Next slide, please. We anticipate doing this not too dissimilar to some of the graphics and the stylistic representations we find in the community, but not necessarily as bold. We're exploring a couple of products that allow us to portray imagery and potentially even text in a way that is not necessarily in your face about it, but a subtle opportunity to have another point of discovery and tie itself back to the community. Before the previous submittal to the proposed submittal also, I think, gives you a little broader sense of how much the form has changed in this approach. The lowering of the elements along the street to 2 stories, the development of a background for the legibility of the forms and the architecture and the composition here along the streetscape relative to what we had previously presented. Next slide, please. Here's a more close in shot of how that, as it is approached from the south, starts to create a complete composition of the project. It is, again, still predominantly residential. It shapes itself down to the street. It explores opportunities to enhance how we embrace and engage the retail and the restaurant and the life experience of the street, but also start to introduce a little bit of the vocabulary from the park, albeit in a little bit different way as it has evolved and continues to evolve to be lighter, both in color palette and in material. Next slide is an additional comparison of what that has become here in the designed experience of St. Andrews. We're thoroughly excited about that and what it can be and what it will be like to walk and in many cases drive by this project. Next slide. We had some discussion at the last presentation about really Chase Street and what's happening along Chase Street. And we took that as a charge to, again, connect and transfer vocabularies as appropriate, both from the frontage of St. Andrews down the side of the building and evolve into that vocabulary we found on the park. A key part of this is many of the visitors to this project, and even potentially some of the residents, but primarily the visitors to this project are likely almost all coming from this parking lot and participating in Chase Street, crossing Chase Street. So we've created or really advanced an idea from our previous presentation into this signature element to the north that really draws people to the entrance for that restaurant, to the rooftop, as well as subtly marks a secondary entrance to the residential patrons or inhabitants of this project. So again, the architecture turns the corner, signifies its interest, and then transitions into a more patio-scape, soft-scape for the residents along St. Andrews. You see a little bit of a vignette here on the right-hand side of how residents along this street has some layering, has some space out in front of it, but works within the safety of the building's form itself. Next slide, please. It made sense at that point to take the vocabulary that was being so successful and is working well for us now on St. Andrews and utilize it here at the entrance, both to the parking and the vehicular entrance to the structure beyond, but really as the entrance to the residential component or residential part of this development. So this slightly adjusted form here allows the scale to come back down. It allows the legibility and the visual transparency of the entrance. I know where I'm going when I'm going home or a guest is coming to visit me. It also creates a wonderful little knuckle that says, okay, something's happening and we're now moving to the park itself. Next slide, please. We had some really good things starting to present themselves, and we talked about that a little bit at the last presentation here along the park, and we've sought to identify those, embrace those, and really leverage how could those mature into a stronger composition for the park. So we've preserved this great courtyard. It is a private courtyard for the residents, but we've taken the vocabulary of these exterior porches and brought them and turned them out around to face and to participate in the park in a much stronger and more bold way. Next slide, please. So our transition now from some of the streetscape to the park itself isn't really a transition, it's an extension of that residential experience, an extension of the neighborhood that this development really contributes to the context of other micro neighborhoods, if you will, or other neighborhoods in and around the project. Next slide. We love the transparency, the lightness, the air effect of the balconies coming out. We also love how they really create a bit of a sense of privacy for those residents who might be living directly on the park. and the potential tension that might exist between the public park and who might live right there next to it. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to complement both in this solution. In the left-hand side, you can see the residential vocabulary stays the residential vocabulary down Chase Street, and becomes lighter, becomes airy, starts to capture the eye, and again, layer a sense of intimacy in the relationship of the private spaces to the public spaces of the park. Next slide, please. We felt very strongly that that needed to continue to evolve as the project turns and faces back to the south and the neighborhood to the south. So this particular part of the project is a relatively new evolution of the residential vocabulary, where we didn't necessarily feel it appropriate to have balconies overlooking the backyards of this neighborhood, but simplify the form, continue to lighten it up, work at breaking down the scale in a couple more ways. We've preserved the small little private park that sits back behind the two forms as they express themselves to the south. But really, again, continue to soften, lighten, and allow to just sit more comfortably in and around the trees and in the context of the park itself. Next slide is a comparison of how that has evolved and what has really advanced to the nature of the architecture in this area. Next slide. So, the board really challenged us at the last presentation to understand and bring together the different elements, both within the project, but those elements within the community and the aspired future for St. Andrews. There's been a tremendous amount of input given by this board, by members of the community. The West Ashley Revitalization Committees had members participate in the dialogues that have led to this evolution, and really proud of what this is and what this can be and how it can contribute to all of those things in a positive and meaningful way. And so with that, I will conclude my presentation and look forward to the discussion and any questions from the board.
Thanks, Nathan. Are there any questions from the board? I had a few. I could start out specifically relating to the site and civil aspects of the project. The last meeting we had some questions that I was hoping to get answered, specifically relating to an update to the FEMA base flood elevation. The previous drawings had shown still the 2004 maps, which are now no longer in effect in the city. So again, just curious on existing elevation of, I believe, was around 11 at the sidewalk. What is the base flood elevation, and if there's an approximate finished floor elevation? Again, just trying to understand the relationship to St. Andrews.
So along St. Andrews, our finished floor is essentially just a matter of inches above the existing curb. We do have and are leveraging some of the topography of the site, if you will. The site does, to a degree, fall off by a couple of feet towards the park side, all of which remains above the flood elevation. So
if the flood elevation on the plans, again, but this is the old flood elevation, it hasn't been updated, is the 2004 maps is 13. The city requires, I believe, 2 feet above your base floor elevation, which would put you at 15. And then existing elevation on the sidewalk is 11. So it's a difference of 4 feet.
So I'm going to have to phone a friend here and ask Dominic to jump in. Thanks, Dominic.
Sure. And again, I know this is a little bit details, but it does have a significant effect if there is a 4-foot difference from the existing sidewalk to your finished floor, assuming you don't want to flood proof, which I assume that's the case.
So the new maps that were adopted, we are actually in an exposed flood zone now.
Okay. Thank you. And Dominic, could you state your name for the record, please?
This is Dominic Jones with Thompson Hutton.
Thank you. And the other question I had was on sheet C13, which was not part of the presentation, was regarding parking. Based on what's required, the number of spaces required spills into the existing parking lot next door. So I was just trying to understand. I know that will come at a later date, I believe. Is that correct? And I assume those spaces would be then incorporated into the next phase.
So all of the required parking for the project will be delivered as part of this development.
Okay,
It may also be noted here, the unit count, I think, is still a carryover from our initial meeting with TRC. I think this particular matrix shows more units than is actually proposed in the concept that the architecture is presenting today. All of that will be brought together as we continue down the TRC path. But there will not be an expectation that additional parking will be necessary in the future. That will balance out day one.
Okay, maybe it was including the existing commercial space too, because it was over 200 spaces that were required on surface per that table.
So and what Nathan was saying was, like I said, the parking that will have all the parking required for the building, we just assumed since the lot is one lot, we wanted to make sure we still had the remaining parking for the commercial space.
Okay, perfect, thanks. And then my last question was just an update to, the conversation from our last couple of meetings on the stormwater strategy, on how that would be handled. I know last time, I think it was just internal to the building, but I wasn't sure if that had developed any further.
So we have advanced that strategy and frankly, it's a series of structures inside the parking that will complement the existing stormwater system for the overall site. We haven't decided which. We're looking at a couple of different options, and you'll see details on that in the future. But the required retention and for the project will be handled within the garage.
Will that be like below grade under the garage, or cisterns within the garage, or?
We have sort of a yes answer to all of that. Because of the configuration of the garage, we have a half level concealed under a portion of the garage that we're going to use essentially large containers, cisterns, above grade as much as possible before we dive into doing anything subterranean. We don't think we're going to need it based on where we're at the moment. So everything, the intent is it'll be an above grade structure under the half level of structures under the half level of the parking structure on essentially the northeast end of the deck area immediately adjacent to the retail.
Thanks. Any other questions from the board?
Erica, I have a couple. This is Dino's. Good evening, Nathan. How are you?
Doing well. Good evening.
Can you talk for a moment about the parking garage and its relationship to the retail? Since it's serving the retail area, there does not appear within the plans to be any transition between the garage and the retail other than external. Is that the intent, or how do you plan to service the retail in terms of parking?
David, would you please go to slide number 5? And it is not particularly well represented here in this version of the diagram. But so a couple of different things that are bringing themselves together. One is the deck is configured, you enter at grade on what I'll say is the plan west version of this, and then it goes up a half level as you move plan right, so that by the time you make that loop again, you've aligned with the first elevated level over the retail. Now, what is important there is and again, it's not depicted here, but in the perspective where we were looking from the parking lot back to the development, and you saw the sort of glass bay window that came down and marked an entrance. Our intent is to be able to go out of the garage in the northeast corner and be able to traverse internally to the purple box to get to that corner, and specifically to that stairwell to take you down the half level you would have to get down to get into the lobbies. So in lieu of going immediately through the retail, we're trying to bring everybody to that corner where it transitions from the commercial to the residential. And if somebody is seeking to come all the way around to the front, they can come around that way. Or frankly, they could do the same thing, although I'm not sure how prominent we're going to make it, by going into the stair tower in the lower right and walking out the mews between the bridal shop and the retail out to the street. So by the time it's all said and done, we should be able to get to that retail from inside the garage from both northeast and southeast corners of the garage using internal stairs to navigate that half story.
Okay. I'm not sure I completely followed, but
Wish I could draw on the screen here, but that's sorry.
Let me ask you about your garbage recycling. Where, and I'm sorry, I've tried to find them. Location of garbage refuge, recycling bins for the units.
So all of that will be handled in the service area. You drive into the parking area and immediately to the left or to the plan east, we've got this kind of complex of service pieces happening right there. Part of that will be conditioned waste, part of that will be recycling, part of that will be some other building services. But that is what that space is dedicated to.
So trucks,
it'll be wheeled out to Chase Street for removal.
so you're talking about just bins? I mean, these are small garbage bins, or?
No, they're not like little Dipsy dumpsters. They're probably 2 or 3 yard dumpsters that get serviced daily. We want to manage this. We want to manage that small and frequent as opposed to large and dramatic.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you talk for a moment about there's been apparently a change in the material palette between the last submission and this one as far as the elevations appear. Can you talk a little bit about the material palette that you're looking at, particularly on the, well, just in general? I've read the details. One of the dilemmas that we have with the Zoom and with electronic copies is we don't have the benefit of the hard copies in front of us, but if you can just speak to this for a moment for our benefits.
Certainly. So the material palette on Chase Street is primarily composed of, well, and actually for the project wide, is primarily composed of brick facades, cementitious siding, and on St. Andrews, we do have some stained wood, particularly in that little retail pocket. And then we are using metal in a number of ways. Yeah, we're also using, David highlights, we're using it at a couple of entrances to soften and create a contrast against some of the masonry. Like I said, the siding, the white in the view is siding. It's a lap siding. We have introduced a little bit of a detail that may not be conventional, so that we start to read more of the vertical elements of the building as opposed to just the long lines of the texture of the siding. You can see that on St. Andrews, but here, or on the park elevations. Along St. Andrews, we've got kind of more broad or bold use of some metals that you will not see on the park. The park is primarily a simple combination of siding as well as masonry. And we've fairly significantly adjusted the use of those so that the project does have a lighter, more airy, and frankly, more residential feel about it. Albeit it's done in a little bit different way. We like that. We like that diversity. Did that answer your question, Dinos? I mean, our
did.
basic colors are brick, siding, metal, and wood.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have at this point.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I've got a few. This is Jeff Johnston. Just kind of curious about 3, maybe 4 things. Number 1, the rendering is starting to allude to possible restaurant use. And just kind of, I would love to hear the strategy on fresh air for the restaurant and some of the other mechanical, like the kitchen exhaust and things like that.
So yes, we were trying to anticipate, and we would fully expect a restaurant user to be interested in a number of these spaces along St. Andrews. And I've spoke in my presentation briefly, we've got a rooftop food and beverage, which is really a small extension of the anticipated food and beverage here on the ground in this view. We've entertainingly called it the Angus Ale House. As such, we're trying to anticipate and have anticipated the need to run that exhaust vertically through the building. We're not interested in sidewall exhaust for kitchen needs. So a good bit of that is choreographed, or we've got it diagrammatically choreographed, at least on our side, to carry vertically through the building. And it's happening both at, I'll say, the north end, the 3-story element, and at the south end in the 2-story element, and at least the provisions for it. We don't ultimately know at this point who that user will be. Will it be retail or will it be food and beverage? I think we're very, I'll say bullish. I'm very interested in seeing it in food and beverage. I think it would be do a lot more for the life and the engagement of the street.
Yeah.
That said, I don't know. So, but
Yeah.
we have done our best to anticipate those needs living into the future.
I think that's a great use, and I think it would be a wonderful addition to St. Andrews. Just if it is going to be a restaurant, I think it's a perfect use here. I think we need to be a little bit more sophisticated and sure about screening that equipment, the fresh air and the kitchen exhaust. The kitchen exhaust hoods are probably the most minimal thing, but the fresh air units and makeup air units tend to take up a lot of space. And if they're going on that 2 or 3 story unit, just as or 2 or 3 story roof, I noticed you've got some rooms right there, bedrooms. It seems like it's incompatible use. So
pardon my interruption. No, the chases go vertically to the utmost top of the building because we have made provision for any residential use that is immediately adjacent to a roof to have the potential to utilize that roof area as they deserve outside space.
Gotcha. My apologies.
No, that's okay. I might have been my poor communication.
All right. Another question I have, this building that we're looking at that has Angus Ale House written on it. This first kind of corner mass, it looks like it's angled on St. Andrews, and just kind of curious to hear the reason why it's angled. And maybe that's the bigger question is, I think one of the things the board asked about last time was just how this building sits on the street, how it addresses each street. And in particular, this one's angled, and just kind of curious as to why. And I can't remember if this corner is closer to the corner or further away, but
so
can you provide some insight into how the siting came about?
Yeah, that's fair. David, I think slide 13 might help the most. So the building itself is not perfectly parallel to St. Andrews, but neither are the structures immediately adjacent to it. And unfortunately, the bridal shop is covered by the bridal shop in this view, but nonetheless, there is a slight angle and a slight opening to the position of the building that was a result of a number of different, well, nothing's parallel on this property. And we actually sort of enjoyed the fact that to the northern side or the right-hand side in this plan, that the project was more open to the street, and it sort of progressively brought you out to essentially the face of the bridal shop. So each element in the proposed development is back from the street a little bit further relative to the smaller scale of the bridal shop, as well as the composition around the corner. We also liked that cars ingressing and egressing from Chase Street had a broader, I'll say, vision triangle, although we don't necessarily need a vision triangle because of the position of our building now. Those first cars will be able to see beyond the building instead of having a, I'll say, a managed view restricted by some chamfer or something on the corner. I think when it's all said and done, the little bit more generous space in front of what hopefully is food and beverage will be an active space that we want, and it's, we'll call it a contribution to the life of the street in that area. But also, we think that subtle alignment, I don't think anybody's ever really going to see it. We'll see it here in plan, but I think we'll feel it in our ability to see and activate along this edge.
That's great. While we're here on this plan, looking at the corner of what I'm guessing is the building footprint, hard to tell, in the lower right corner, David, if you can use your mouse, of the building. Yeah, well, let me see if I can do this. I'm thinking of this spot in particular. Is that a building, or is that planter, or what?
That spot is building. I think we've
Okay.
got, it is presenting itself a little bit tighter to that curb edge than I think it will be when we're all done. We made it pretty. We made it a little tighter than the design really intends, but no, that is building. And then I think part of what might be a little confusing here, we did not in these rendered plans distinguish the glass from the masonry. So you see these little step in and step out of the entrance or potential entrance pieces here that, yeah, that begin to shape or further advocate for that transition from the street into the space itself.
Super. Well, kind of curious. I can only react to what I'm seeing here. It looks like that dimension is, would you guess, 5 feet or so?
No, it's more than that. Which dimension? Which dimension are you referring to? You talking about the depth of the transition into the retail, or the proximity of that corner of the building to the curb?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that kind of dimension right
Yeah,
now.
that's where I'm suggesting we don't have it represented quite right in our illustration. There's more space there than that.
Gotcha. Okay, last question.
Yeah.
I was curious to hear some more thoughts on the garage screening. I think it's an interesting concept. Would like to hear some more about what that might be.
So we currently have on the table, are you talking about the sort of the literal nature of what it is physically, or are you talking about, okay.
No.
So we got two concepts at play. I think our preferred concept is actually, we'll call it a polymer canvas. It is, we've recently used, and it's being done. Actually, I believe this board saw it on a project here in Charleston, where it is a high performance screen, but it's not metal. It is a engineered fabric, and that then can be printed on in various ways. It can be perforated. It can have a certain amount of transparent. The translucency is not really transparent. Translucency. So the approach we like the most is using these, I'll say, stretched engineered fabric on frame. We believe that will do what we want it to do, last the longest, and present it the best. We have an alternate that's a metal strategy, but I think this this will be the best, and we'll bring you some samples and show it to you when we come back for preliminary.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. I appreciate that, Nathan. Thanks a lot.
You're very welcome.
I had one question as well. Ms. Kristen Krause. On the retail stores, are you going to have signage? What was your proposed for signage for those retail stores on the street front?
So we have a couple of options. If you would, yeah. So there's a handful of different things.
Oh, I see it now.
Happening. So yeah, there's on the smaller mason or brick form, we're not exaggerating the depth in the same way we are on the larger, and we'd like to just simply use a lettered or some other kind of treatment along these profiles that we're adding. At the courtyard, I think we like the idea of some kind of an architectural signage feature. And then on the north, we think a little bit more traditional approach to kind of a signage band within the large openings makes the most sense. So we've tried to depict that, at least kind of the intent of where we think is most appropriate for signage as the design advances.
Thanks, Nathan. That's
You're
all
very
my
welcome.
questions.
Any other questions? So with none, we will open it up for the public comment period. I will start off with reading letters and emails that have been sent into the city to be read. The first, and David, I realized in going through the letters ahead of the meeting that I think the first and fourth person listed are the same person with two different emails. So I will read those both concurrently and combine them. So the first is from Bridget Callahan Lussier, and her address is not listed, but and I'm just going to include items that our board has purview over and exclude those items in all of the letters that we do not have purview over. But dear Design Review Board members, thank you for the opportunity to submit comments. The new design is an improvement over the previous version. The main concerns from the Magnolia neighborhood pertaining only to those issues that DRB will consider. They would like to see a building to green space ratio that is more along the lines of what's in place at the Concord, which is a former apartment complex that is turned into condominiums on the other side of the park. With the current design, almost all of the property is built out with impervious surfaces. Even if permeable pavers are used in landscaping, the barrier layer under the pavers is almost impervious. No stormwater ponds are proposed. To approve this design without consideration of stormwater management would seem like a potential pitfall. Another concern is where the residents will go for recreation, dog walking, and just to get outside. The development plans to use Ackerman Park for the residents of the 235 apartments to get their green space for recreation, but that space is already utilized fairly heavy. Please require the development to reduce the building footprint to allow for more green space and stormwater capture on the property for the residents' enjoyment and also to prevent flooding issues, rather than to rely on a public space that is already heavily utilized. Talking about the use of Ackerman Park again, and as a general principle, such a dense housing development should factor in green space for their 235 new households on their property and not assume availability for use of adjacent public property. Thank you very much. And then she sent a follow-up email and saying just 2 follow-up points. While she is personally excited about the idea of a rooftop restaurant space as a neighborhood president, I can't say that the neighborhood would be unanimously in support without sending out an email to solicit feedback. Since it's just in conceptual mode at this time, I'm assuming this is not the time to do that. My guess would be that this idea may not be well received by others in closer proximity based on the issues that MEX1 has generated. For the benefit of our future property owners and tenants, I would imagine that a rooftop terrace would be a highly desirable amenity and possibly a less contentious design alternative. I'm amazed that more apartments and condos don't have rooftop terraces. The view from the floor 4 of the storage building across the street is amazing and would be perfect for watching the sunset. While I imagine there are additional structural costs, residents would be willing to pay extra for the view, privacy, and gorgeous setting to host small gatherings on the roof. I wanted to clarify that my excitement on that element is a personal level, but with my president hat on, a terrace for residents is probably a safer bet. On potentially creating green space for stormwater storage and adding natural areas to the design and the adjacent parking lot, this has a lot of potential and is very exciting. It can make a terrific amenity for residents while addressing stormwater and green space concerns with the design. Please give that some thought and let me know if I can point you to de-paving project examples in other parts of the US. Converting paved, derelict parking lots to green space is a great way to improve the aesthetics, water quality control, stormwater management, and recreation opportunities for your new tenants and larger community. The next correspondence received is from Kenneth Marolda. Dear board members, upon reviewing the revised proposal for 829 St. Andrews Boulevard by Grambling Brothers, the West Ashley Revitalization Committee submits the following analysis for your consideration at the upcoming meeting of your board on March 15th. First, and perhaps most prominently, the alterations to the massing along St. Andrews Boulevard reduces its geometric appearance and makes the project less overbearing to the neighborhood around it. The appearance of multiple facades with staggered heights and numbers of stories, coupled with the integration of small courtyard features, breaks up the rectangular mass. Along St. Andrews Boulevard, the configuration of these facades forms a step pattern that complements the two adjacent single-story structures rather than clashing with them. In lowering the street front facades, the effect is to build up the facade height slowly, ultimately culminating at the corner where the Chase Street meets St. Andrews Boulevard, which appropriately is the most visually prominent point. The massing along the facade facing Ackerman Park has remained consistent, but the new detailing with balconies helps it to feel lighter. The screens intended to shield the parking deck from the view along Avondale Avenue will replace the unsightly angle of this proposal with an artistic representation that we hope will echo other artistic murals in the area. The proposal features a rooftop bar or restaurant with hopes that this will attract a high quality commercial tenant. The immediate concern with incorporation of this design feature is noise for the neighborhood. However, the applicant has addressed this concern by noting that the occupancy load based on its size would be at 49 people. It is our opinion that offering an attractive rooftop amenity will help attract the caliber of businesses that can produce the job opportunities and recreational reputation that will help further revitalization. Our commission is tasked with a responsible and sustainable revitalization, and one component of this is home affordability. The applicant is confident that despite reducing their unit count in order to accommodate the massing reductions and architectural revisions, that they will still be able to meet market rates for units. Our commission is aware that these planning issues are not directly within the purview of the Design Review Board. However, we hope that the Design Review Board may take into consideration the design features of this proposal, namely lower street front facades correlating to less units, and the rooftop feature is being proposed in agreement with the goals and objectives of our commission. Thank you for the time and consideration on feedback on this proposal. The next email received is from Marcia Higgins, who is president of the Maryville-Ashleyville Neighborhood Association. She talks about some things that are not in our purview, which I will skip over. She does mention taking away a needed car to bus stop for surrounding communities. And in addition, this design does not specifically address the entrances and exits for the residents and customers to and from this apartment complex and retail area. She talks about traffic, which again is not in our purview. And that's her comments. And the last is from Donna Jacobs. Good evening, Madam Chairman and members of the Design Review Board. I spoke in January when this project was previously shown. At that time, I pointed out the redevelopment of the Ryan site at 829 St. Andrews Boulevard has immense potential to showcase what revitalization can mean for West Ashley. Plan West Ashley spoke to the importance of mixed use when commercial sites at major intersections were considered for redevelopment. It is imperative that this project reflects the highest and best for the area. With that, I am happy to see this much improved design for the site. I do believe that the architectural conversation between St. Andrews Boulevard, Ackerman Park, Chase Street, and the neighborhood has become more unique and respectful. I know that this board, with all its expertise, will continue to refine the necessary details in this matter prior to giving this project concept approval. I also see that the architectural design along St. Andrews Boulevard is much more exciting and increases the opportunity for a very active engagement with the pedestrian. I just want to make sure that the illustrated larger sidewalk is reflected in the specific details of the design. In addition, the rooftop spaces shown should be designed in such a way to minimize any noise and any lighting issues to the neighborhood of Avondale, as well as the new residents of this project. Since you are the experts at reading these technical documents, I would like to point out several practical considerations of the design in hopes that they assure you they are addressed because the devil is in the details. Lighting within the parking structure and along the project should provide safety for the residents and users and in no way intrude on the park or in Avondale residents. Where is trash collection on site and how will waste management trucks access it? Is this a function for the first floor of the parking area? Service access to the retail and offices on the first floor should be through the parking deck. Think the parking deck at the Belmont for the businesses on Meeting Street. Where is the loading area for moving into the apartments? Where is the access for fire and emergency vehicles for the complex? All of these and maybe a few other infrastructure considerations should be carefully reviewed in order that the properties along Avondale Avenue not be needed for these purposes. The community is excited about the conversation of the abandoned restaurant in the current boat parking lot to a vibrant, exciting addition to the community. With your help, we can make it a highly functional and beautiful for West Ashley. We can set the bar for other developments that will follow. That concludes the written correspondence that was received. We have a few members of the public that I believe will be speaking. The first is Council Member Shade.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to address you. First, a general thank you for the level of detail that your questions are shown and the concern that you have for this project. This board has always exercised its great discretion and attention to the importance of this particular project. As stated earlier, this is round 3 of this project coming before you for consideration. You are fully aware of the level of interest that this project has. You've got the 3 adjoining neighborhood association presidents who have weighed in. Ken, Bridget, and Ms. Higgins have all presented to you their concerns and issues that they have with this project. And so you know the level of concern and interest that this has. I don't want to repeat too much of what Ken has written to you and you have read into the record already. I participated in that meeting that we had with Michael and Nathan earlier, and I think Ken has done a wonderful job of summarizing the concerns that we had and questions that we had. And we do appreciate how they have addressed a lot of the things that we had talked about, in particular the St. Andrews side of this, and how they have sort of broken up the mass appearance on the St. Andrews side and made it much more friendlier for pedestrian traffic. And on the other side, the garage, questions you all have asked about that, I think have been addressed that as well. I am in particular very excited about the prospects of the rooftop and the potential amenity that can provide to the neighborhood. This is what we're looking for, is a high level amenity for the folks of West Ashley. If something like this is approved, it will be one of the few things of a rooftop access that residents and visitors will have in the West Ashley area. So I think that's very important. This is going to draw a lot of attention to this area for our residents and for those who want to visit and patronize that establishment. We like where we're going with this. It's a huge improvement on what we have seen from the first 2 proposals, and we keep on encouraging our applicant to accommodate the concerns that this board has. So we like where we're going. We like what we have right in front of us, and appreciate the time that y'all had with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Katie Zimmerman?
Hey there. I can't tell if I'm actually on. Are you all able to? Okay,
Yes,
cool.
we can hear you.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Katie Zimmerman. I'm the executive director of Charleston Moves, and I also happen to live behind this parcel in the Concord. So I'm speaking with two hats tonight. I just want to make sure in looking at the drawings that were presented tonight, I want to make sure that the site design and building placement does not preclude safe, connected, comfortable, usable bicycle and pedestrian space. It looks like in the drawings that the space for pedestrians is coming along very nicely, but I do want to make sure that there's also a focus on people who are going to come in with bikes, who are going to come in with cargo bikes, any type of way that they're planning to get here, because this is very close to the Maryville Bikeway. It's very close to Charleston County's project that they are working on to create a multi-use path from Sycamore to the entrance of the bikeway and improving the light at Sycamore. So it's really important that this project fit in within the larger context of multimodal and how people are going to access this site to shop, dine, and live and commute to and from work. So if there is not enough space as provided for a proper shared use path, then the other option would be flipping what the designs show right now as on-street parking, which is not currently marked at that location on St. Andrews, flipping it so that the parking provides a buffered bike lane. I don't know how SCDOT would react to that, but I just want to make sure and get that on the record now so that we don't get too far down the road and it's too difficult with the design to accommodate those users. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Donna Jacobs? And we have a little over 3 minutes left if I'm calculating the time used by the applicant team. So, and I believe the last with Donna and then Ken left. So if y'all could take maybe about a minute, minute and a half each, we should be okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, you actually read my letter in, so I'm not going to reread the letter that I submitted because I didn't know it would be read in. But I do want to just thank you for doing that and reiterate this devil is in the details aspect, because I once remembered a great conversation at the Design Review Board where y'all went into great detail about things about just gutters and dryer vents on big structures like this, which really we don't see but makes a big difference. And I also wanted to say I live along Alicia Alley where there is service ingress and egress to the commercial businesses there. And this is really can be an issue. I really would challenge you not to allow garbage cans to be pulled to Chase Street, because that's just going to be super problematic. And I also want to refresh y'all's memory when we went through the design for the new Victory, there were a lot of concerns with our residents there about where the grease traps are located, how the restaurants are going to be engaged. And I think these are the details that are so important that we make sure we get right, because I think this new architectural plan looks grand, but those details, if they're not hammered out right now, will cause some use problems. And I would hate to see Chase Street and St. Andrews Boulevard just lined with service trucks trying to service these commercial aspects. So I appreciate the time again, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Ken Marolda, and I apologize if I mispronounced that.
Can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
And actually, you did get it right. Thank you.
Okay.
So I did write the letter on behalf of the commission. That was the summary of our meeting. But now I'd like to kind of take that hat off and speak to you as in my role as Avondale president, just briefly. One of my residents mentioned to me something that I think is promising about this project, which is that she was always concerned about the park, Ackerman Park, using Ackerman Park in the evening. And she's older, and she mentioned that this has kind of been a problem since long before I even moved here. that older residents didn't feel comfortable using that park in the evenings. I think that this proposal with the balconies or the porch areas, the little balconies facing the park actually helps with that issue. It's the Jane Jacobs kind of eyes on the street theory, that, you know, people watching over it, people being visible and active will kind of help maybe boost some confidence about crime and safety in that park in the evening hours, and maybe make it more usable for people. So I'd also just like to echo, I guess, Katie Zimmerman's point about the bike lane. I do use it pretty frequently personally. I am an avid biker up and down St. Andrews and on the bikeway, and I would like to, I guess, see that be used safely. So I think that's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. With that, the public comment period is closed. David, if you could please give staff recommendations.
Sure. Thank you, Erica. Staff recommendations. Number one, staff feels the applicant has done a nice job of responding to many of the concerns from the board and the public since the last review. And we like the direction the project is going. And the massing and height along St. Andrews was one of the main concerns that was brought up, and the applicant has reduced the building height along St. Andrews to 2 to 3 stories, stepping up to 4 stories, and then stepping up to 5 stories along Chase Street. And the structure is not as imposing along St. Andrews as the previous submittal. And with the open front courtyard, we feel the street level is inviting and interesting. It draws you in. Staff comment number 2, while the building massing and the volume has improved, there's concern that the front facade along St. Andrews is a bit busy and should be simplified. Staff feels there are too many facade styles or too many moves on the building front, and possibly too many material changes used. But as a whole, we support the concept of massing along St. Andrews. Number 3, staff supports the lighter color palette, which we feel aids in the building feeling lighter or less dense. The massing of the rear of the building facing Ackerman Park has changed very little, but staff feels it's more successful with, and I was talking about the massing for the rear of the building. But staff feels it's more successful with some of the detailing to the building ends, such as the material change at the top of the 4th floor, additional balconies and lighter color. We also like the addition of the top cornice or overhang. The top floor cornice has been strengthened, which staff feels helps to distinguish and define the top of the building. Staff does have an issue with the top floor bay windows. I'm sorry, the top floor bay windows facing St. Andrews and the heavy cap to these windows. They are directly under the overhang. The window caps seem a little redundant, and staff feels the caps could be eliminated or lightened up in thickness. We recommend this as part of the overall simplification of styling and detailing along St. Andrews. And I was talking about these, the caps, the bay windows. But staff does recommend conceptual approval.
Thanks, David. We are now in, sorry, Nathan, do you or any part of your team have any response or clarification to public comments or David's comments?
So I think a member of the public mentioned that the project moving forward is going to be in large part in the details. And we've got a good list of mostly technical aspects to address here. Generally seem to be positive response to the direction of the architecture, and we love that. And I think we can continue to be challenged by the board and the expectation that this board sets for the delivery of the direction and the quality of what we're going to do here at St. Andrews. So, you know, I think we can provide all the clarification necessary at our next visit and provide really the detail and the assurance that we do have services, building function, and really maybe some of the community connections in hand here. and we'll be held accountable for that, not only by this board, but also by the technical review process. So I'm excited about what we've presented. I think we've got a great project on our hands and really do something to demonstrate what can be done here at St. Andrews and what can be done in the future of West Ashley. So I look forward to the board's thoughts and working with the different members of the community to move this project forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. We are now in board discussion and motion.
Madam Chair, you're going to shoot me. I do have a question for the applicant that I just realized. When I was looking, I'm sorry, Nathan, when we were looking at the floor plans, I'm assuming that the levels of the garage align with the floor plates of the retail and the apartments. Is that a fair assumption?
So the answer is yes,
Okay.
very specifically. So, and that this might have been part of the nuance to what I was suggesting before, but the first elevated level along St. Andrews, so the first level of residences on St. Andrews, is actually a level and a half up in the parking structure. So the parking structure slopes on each side. So it's you come in, make a left, and you go up essentially a half level. You would traverse. On your return traverse, you're on the first elevated level of the residences along the park. And then on your, what would essentially be your third run up, you hit the first elevated level of residences over the retail along St. Andrews. The retail wanted more height, and the best way to do that was to build that height into the layering of those elements. So I'm going to take a bit of your question as a compliment if we were able to disguise the shifts in heights that well. But no, hopefully that answers you. You have flats on each end of the garage, and each end of the garage aligns with the levels, albeit starting a level and a half up on the St. Andrews side.
So the level, so the first level, the ground level of retail is higher?
Correct, than a typical level for the residential by essentially a half story.
All across the entire plate of the first.
Anything in purple, yes.
Okay, but how about in the blue when we transition
So,
away? Because you were talking.
No, when you move from the purple to the blue, there is a shift that takes place at that set of entrances over there. You don't, it's masked in that composition, but the ground level residences immediately adjacent to the retail are not as tall as the retail.
Do you have, I did not find a section in your submission. Is there a section that I just missed? The question that I really am leading up to is this. When you look at drawing A106, you're showing the roof level and then the parking at that level. So I'm assuming that the parking deck terminates at the roof level. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that I'm assuming is just an exposed exterior parking level, no roof.
Correct.
Okay, and that will have to be some type of railing that wraps that level. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is that shown in the elevations that you're showing us?
Yes.
Okay, and can you point that out to me? Because forgive me, I'm just
So
want to.
you probably, that's okay. You probably need to go to the raw elevation sheets.
Sorry, it's a little slow.
It's okay. So David, if you zoom in to let's go with the top overall view on the right-hand side, or actually just keep zooming straight into the balance of this. Actually, I'd pan to the right so we can see St. Andrews. There we go. All right, so it's hard because we've made it opaque here, But the reality is you can see after the kind of the vertical white where we will put the printed screens, immediately to the left, there's a gap and you see a piece of structure that's pochade like concrete. The top of that line right there. So can I draw on this? Oh, I can draw on this. So this line right here, which should align with this, if I can draw it straight, is the top of the
Oh, there you go.
garage.
Okay, now I see it.
So and we're using the garage itself to screen headlights so that the screens themselves will not have to contend with that sort of direct illumination.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
That's a fair question. We'll have some additional detail for you the next middle.
Any other thoughts or emotion?
There's been a lot of good questions raised, or concerns or thoughts or challenges. I like that word as we move forward. I'm still a little unclear as to how the building meets the ground. And I think having some details would be really helpful to show that.
I think a building section would be very helpful so that we can understand the issues associated. I'm sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, a building section would help. I'm talking more about kind of enlarged plan details around building entries, particularly, but really we're infilling a lot of what would be a city block, and the detail aspect is where the sidewalk ends and where the user's realm begins. And it's hard to ascertain where those are in the drawings that we have. And it would benefit, because I think Donna touched on a couple things and Katie too, that would impact a little bit of the architecture depending on how this building relates to the curb and the sidewalk. If there needs to be a loading zone, where does that live? If there needs to be a multi-use path, how does that interact, particularly on that corner of Chase and St. Andrews? I hear what Nathan said about that's not the correct relationship, but what is the correct relationship? Agree. I think we all agree that what was shown is a little too tight, but
yeah.
I think overall, I think the massing moves is really good, really good. A lot of really interesting things. St. Andrews presents so much better. I commend the design team for that move, and the developer to allow the performer to suffer a little bit to respond back to the neighborhood. I think that's great. I'm kind of torn on, and I think it's one of David's comments about the front elevation, about it being maybe too disparate. And there's something that's interesting about it. When I think of a lot of material changes, I think of a lot of challenges and detailing to make those material changes right. And what's hard to tell from these elevations at this scale is do the material transitions make sense? And there was that little cutout, right in that zone in the courtyard in the centerpiece, where there's a balcony railing right dead in the center of the courtyard, and it looks like it was inset with wood and siding. But at the bottom there, where it hits that storefront, it did something weird, at least in the model views I saw. And I know this is a concept, but I guess as you develop a concept and you are presenting a design that has 4 or 5 different materials, you got to have some sort of logic or some sort of rules in which those materials play. And I guess I just see a couple places where the rules aren't quite figured out yet. And a simplification, as David suggests, would help in that it would eliminate a rule or two. But to me, it's more like define the rules and apply them to the building palette where they need to be. And like I said, I just see a few places where the rules aren't making sense right now. I do wonder about the longevity of the wood siding. I've seen it used around town. I'm sure there's some other products that might have some more durability and maintenance free that would give you the same sort of look or aesthetic. I still am a little concerned about the kitchen equipment, and if we're going to put it on the 4th floor here on St. Andrews, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of room of the parapet. Maybe I'm wrong, a section would help there, but having some strategy on rooftop equipment at that zone would be pretty paramount. I'm kind of rambling here. There was also on St. Andrews, I think maybe let me see here, sheet 13. There's the devil's in the details. And let me tell you, Nathan, you're right. There's a lot of details on this project. Page 13. Yeah, this image right here, the upper right image proposed right kind of down the alley in between Bridals by Jody and this this project. You see the lower first floor is kind of brownish, and I guess that's wood. And then there's a cantilevered wood siding part of what I'm assuming is cantilevered wood siding. Y'all see where I am? I'm going to try to annotate. Yeah, right. That's one of those examples of like, is the materials playing by the rules? And I would kind of challenge that or question that. It seems like an odd place for a cantilever or an overhang. And
Jeff, may I add a couple of things?
please, I'm checking my notes here and just kind of going through my random thoughts. So please.
I just, I'm like you. First of all, having Councilman Shade and Donna Jacobs and Katie and everybody engaged in this discussion only shows the significance of the project. And there's no doubt in my mind that the applicant has embraced a grander, broad picture of this evolution. And I'm like Jeff and probably everybody else. I truly applaud the developer, the applicant, MPS, and everybody, and in the evolution of that facade along St. Andrews Boulevard, particularly, and the manner in which it's beginning to respond proportionately. And from a massing standpoint, I think that that's a key component in as a leader in continuing the evolution discussion with regards to this project. And it is the big picture that I think that Nathan so eloquently delineated and presented upon. And when it gets, as I've learned over the 4 years or so, and certainly out of respect for Jeff and Kristen and Andy and everybody else who's served on this board for years and years and years, that when it comes to us at a conceptual stage, it is the detailing that we are trying to pay particular attention to ensure that it's documented and written so that we have a springboard upon which to carry on with the subsequent conversations as we go forward with the evolution of the design. And I think it's the big picture items right now that really need to be delineated in more detail, honestly, before I'm comfortable going forward. And this is just me speaking, before I'm comfortable going forward with an approval of a conceptual design. A great example are the items, as Jeff was saying, working out the location of the exhaust hoods, really looking what we've expressed before the issue of this elevation on the garage, and yet it's really not fully addressed on this conceptual application. And I think I understand where you're going with it. And let me say this too, Nathan, I certainly applaud y'all's humor. I love the cow, the dog, and everything else that's in there. I think it needs some further refinement and delineation from my standpoint. I think the aspect, as Donna said, we have seen in other projects, and this one is of a very large scale. So I know that you're getting your hands around the big picture items, but at the conceptual level, I guess we're looking at more delineation. And I think it would truly help the aspect of my review personally, if there is more detail provided. I'm going to let Andy respond to the landscape. I'm concerned about offering an approval on a concept that looks to be predominantly a rendered site plan as opposed to really a landscape concept site plan that gives some indication of the type of material palette, vegetated palette that you're using. But anyway, I will stop there and come back when we're ready to get into a motion.
I echo just about everything. I echo everything that everybody's really been saying. You know, I do like some of the evolution of the building. I really wish that some of this detail was shown in the landscape plan. I think there are a lot of spaces, you know, just both vegetatively and hardscape site furnishing, how the building at that level engages the site. I think Jeff alluded to, how does this building meet the site? I think a lot of that can be brought out in the landscape concept. I mean, there are really a lot of very interesting spaces that can be illustrated and brought into concept. I mean, the muse that was being described between the bridal shop and the building. I mean, that's a very interesting space that, you know, we kind of need to see how that's going, you know, how that is initially presented and can be evolved. You know, what are the thoughts there? The importance of Chase Street, you know, what is that environment? How do you move from Chase Street into the building, the pool area? You know, a lot of these details, I mean, I know they will evolve into preliminary, but I just don't even see enough of a concept here to react to. You know, what are your thoughts? You know, what materials are you thinking about? Once again, vegetatively, hardscape, street furnishings, and how do these relate not just to the public realm, but also the building? There's a lot of detail, conceptual detail missing in those elements that I don't see in the package. And we talk about how important these things are, but those elements are not shown to the board.
Yeah, and you know, this isn't criticism, it's constructive effort to try to help, because I think that just hearing everybody on the board particularly and everybody in the public, we're truly excited about the evolution. Unfortunately, from my standpoint as a member of the DRB, we've just got to rely on the detail to a great extent, and a project of this magnitude and scale mandates a good bit more information. So from a massing and height aspect, as we've all said, the structure is evolving wonderfully. I think it's the scale issue that we are trying to grasp at, and honestly, I think that more detail will certainly help in that regard. I think that some of it can be defined just as big picture items that could be addressed, upon which I could then support a conceptual approval. And I don't know if anyone has any other comments, but I'm certainly willing to make a motion if. when it's appropriate with y'all's help.
Well, I would just like to add a few more thoughts about as the project develops. And this again touches on one of David's comments about perhaps some simplicity on the facade. And it goes back to my kind of rule, I suppose, or what are the materials rules, but the materiality, some consistency, it looks, I would question whether we've got a brick base and then we've got cast stone and then we have siding. And typically whenever you have cast stone, which is a very refined product, it's usually associated with more masonry. Rarely would I see cast stone with siding. So I would just kind of question that use and the compatibility and question its appropriateness really in this neighborhood context. So I just kind of ask as you refine materials to think about things like that. There's a lot, and there's a lot of brick ups and downs. Sometimes it's on the third floor, sometimes it's on the second floor, sometimes it's on the first floor. I would ask if there's some consistency there, and it's very common with a lot of multifamily projects that we review. Try to be honest. And I appreciate the honesty and simplicity on St. Andrews, but I think the rest of the building needs that honesty too. Really, there's a keep consistent with wherever that brick needs to live. I really appreciate if it were my I don't know. I really appreciate how the brick is on the 3 stories on the Ackerman Park side, and the 4th floor is the siding. But my point is not so much that that's my preference. My point is, can we get some consistency on where that brick lives? Typically, when we have garage entries, we in the past have tried to divide those up into single car drive lanes rather than 1, 2, or 3 car wide opening. So I would ask that we kind of consider that, as is typical with other projects of this scale. Again, going along with consistency of materials, there's maybe look at a consistent cornice philosophy or strategy. And this elevation is cohesive. Again, this is one of the better, well put together elevations, but as you go around the other buildings or the other sides, that cornice comes and goes, and it seems just a little awkward, where it comes and goes. And I'm mainly talking about the cornice on the sided parts. So it's in there. It's like ragu. You'll figure it out where it is. I wonder on the Ackerman Parks if those projected balconies, if we kind of go back to the backside, just a suggestion. This is a perfect example. That balcony on the far left, I love how you talked about the balconies provide some lightness and airiness to them. And just curious, is that brick O, or is that really necessary? Can the detailing of the balcony just continue to the ground and continue to lighten it up? You've got so much masonry around there. It just would be helpful to have a pause from that, and maybe have those brownish grayish columns just go to the ground. Just a thought. And that might simplify the palette. I'm just thinking about all these details and the finessing. This sample panel is going to be you could live in this sample panel. 2 or 3 people could. Just keep it a little simpler and eliminate some of those details, and it will make your life a little easier. So those are my comments relative to, I think, just material simplicity and detailing simplicity, which I think contributes to the scale issue or challenge that Dinos was talking about. All those things contribute to a building scale.
David, can you go back? Can you go to drawing 20 for a moment? I'd love to ask the board a question. The previous submittal that was made in the top left is a really nice and very interesting contemporary modern evolution of architecture. And I do believe that at previous board meetings, the comment was made how successful the Ackerman Park facade was evolving. what is, would love to hear other comments as far as, is the proposal on the right a progressive evolution, or is the one on the left really a direction that might provide the applicant more substantial design language to go forward with?
In my opinion, and I've talked a lot, but this is one of those areas that kind of breaks down what I'm seeing on the other 2 or 3 or 4 elevations. This one seems all of a sudden foreign. Yeah, and I think it's the 4-story siding solution.
Mhm.
And the siding even goes down to 5 stories on that center projected part, it looks like. And this is one of the other elevations we were looking at, had brick up to 3 stories with siding on top. To me, there's definitely some tension on this side that wasn't there before. Although I do appreciate the lightness and the materiality and the color, that it's not brick. And maybe that's where that brick, as I said, being 3 stories tall, makes some compromise or more sense of what used to be. I do think that the previous solution was, for some reason, it seemed more consistent, I should say, with the other elevations. This one now seems foreign.
It's just cleaner. It comes off much cleaner. I'm sorry, Andrew.
No, I think it, I think I'm on record as saying that I felt like it was more successful in the previous iteration than I feel like it is now. And it is much cleaner and has some definition to it. I do think that the previous solution was much more successful.
I agree.
Well, I'm willing to take a stab at a motion unless there are other comments.
Go ahead, Dino.
Yeah.
And I say this with great enthusiasm for the evolution and continued development of this project, and many thanks to the applicant and Nathan and your entire team for this evolution. It is exciting. And I do think that this is a huge step forward as we move toward further development of all of it. I move, though, that we move for deferral with the following comments. I would include staff comments 2 and number 6. And then board comments would include to provide more information as it relates to the general services concept. For example, service for retail restaurant. How are they serviced? Where do the trucks drop off the produce, the product? Service to apartments regarding loading and unloading. When people move in, where a more delineation as to how is that handled, or is Chase Street the option? Service regarding general garbage and recycling, and would really like to see more detail in that regard. Fire and emergency vehicular circulation. We've talked about the stormwater, and I know that I have no doubts y'all have a strong feel in regards to the right solution, but without going into any specific detail, would like to see more delineation on how the stormwater is going to be contained. Is it a combination of above grade and underground? What exactly might it be? Because certainly by this point, you've gone far enough in the evolution. Would like to see more delineation in the relationship between the site and the building. A conceptual landscape plan that might give us a general description of the vegetation. a site plan with key dimensions regarding building to right of way to sidewalks, etc.
Could I interrupt, Dinos? I think just an engineered site plan that shows the features, because right now the site plan really just shows the building and Chase Street, and no sidewalks, no planters along St. Andrews, just a true site plan.
That's perfect, an engineered site plan.
Well, you know, if I may also, just on the landscape plan, materiality of both vegetation,
And hardscape.
hardscape and site furnishings, and enough detail to understand these spaces.
Well, this kind of, excuse me, it kind of reminds me of the multiple iterations we had on that Maybank project, where these.
Yeah, the gathering. I think it was called the gathering, Jeff.
The standard.
Oh, the standard, right.
No, I'm thinking of the Four Corners, the one that we just did near the Town and Country.
Yeah.
And we spent
Yes.
so much time on understanding its relationship to the street, and it took a couple of deferrals, and I can't. This is another one of those projects where that connection is important.
Mhm.
And
Agreed.
I can't understate that. We need that. Detailed drawings need to be provided that show the relationship to the street.
Yeah, or even detailed concepts. I mean, right now we don't
Yeah.
have much to go on. I wanted, because we are still in conceptual, so I just want to make that clear. But yeah, I mean, some
Yes.
concepts, yeah, I mean,
Some vignettes of those areas, you know, it's,
agreed.
and you know,
Okay.
the plan can give us some more idea of what those materials are.
Sure. We're still, and Dinos is still making a motion, so I want to backtrack just to get not too out of order, so I apologize. You left off on site plan, Dinos. Do you have additional items?
And an explanation on transition zone on Ackerman Park between the development and the park. And it may be clearly delineated now, but I think the site plan will help a great deal. Just a couple of other things, better coordination of occupancy functions. We talked about the exhaust hoods. I'm looking at the floor plan and I'm trying to find chases to deal with those, and just want to be sure that they've been addressed.
So what was that last one? Provide better explanation between?
Coordination of occupancy functions, restaurant and living space, things such as that. Apartment refuge, I mean, do the apartment dwellers take the garbage down? Is there a trash chute? How is the garbage addressed? I mean, 200 plus units, there's going to be a lot of stuff coming through. The applicant endeavored to explain to us how the parking structure relates to retail. I would like to see that graphically. Provide more detailed information regarding the building elevations, particularly the parking structure. And
Hold on
what
one
is,
second, Dinos.
okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
What was that last one?
Provide more detailed information on building elevations. That would include the parking structure elevation on facing, I don't know what direction that is. I guess it's, is it east?
Yes.
The south. And then also, I think one thing that would help tremendously for all of us would be a rendered building elevation that shows shadows, that delineates shadow, so that we can get a sense really of the building form and building movement. And just to share, it's hard to see that on these electronic copies. And then finally, I would include that the applicant go back and look at the previous submittal of the Ackerman Park elevations, the simplicity in which those are reflected and presented, and build upon that previous submittal, both in form and material palette.
Okay, is that everything, Dino?
That's everything from me. Did I leave anything out, guys?
I think I'm going to try and read it back to you. So if you could let me know or correct me when I misspeak. But we have a motion for deferral made by Dinos, including staff comments 2 and 6. Board comments. 1, provide more information relating to general services from a conceptual standpoint. A few of the specific items mentioned were general restaurant service, service to apartments, which would include garbage collection, general garbage collection and recycling, fire and EMS service, and providing more info on the conceptual stormwater approach. 2, provide a better concept of the materiality of vegetation, hardscape, and site furnishings. 3, provide an engineered site plan. 4, provide an explanation on the transitions between the project and Ackerman Park. 5, provide better coordination between occupancy functions. 6, provide a graphic explanation on how the parking garage relates to the retail. 7, provide more detail on building elevations, specifically the parking structure elevation. 8, provide rendered building elevations showing shadows. And 9, the applicant should review previous elevations at Ackerman Park and its simplicity and build upon that previous submittal's form and material palette. Okay, so is there a second?
This is Andy. I'll second it.
Okay, I'll now call roll. Jeff,
In favor.
Kristen,
Yes, in favor.
and then myself, yes, in favor as well. Thank you all very much. We will now move on to item number 2, 334 Folly Road, requesting the approval for the demolition to 6 structures that are over 50 years of age.
Erica,
Yes,
could I ask for a 2-minute break?
sure.
I will be right back.
Okay.
Thank you. Um, hey, Eric, can I ask you a question? Eric Meckley?
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay,
I
great.
had a question for you regarding Michael McCormick. I'm not seeing his name. You know, his phone number, there's a phone number
Yes.
listed that wasn't provided to me.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. I think he's calling in. His number should be 843-971-3646.
Yes, okay, here he is. Thank you.
Yep.
Are we ready to get started?
Yes, let me.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Michael McCormick, can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
I can
good.
hear you. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I
We
can hear you.
can.
Thank you. Okay, all set, Erica. Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is item number 2, 334 Folly Road, requesting approval for the demolition to 6 structures that are over 50 years of age. There's additional structures listed: 1639 Tatum, 336 Folly Road, 350 Folly Road. David,
I
do
have
you,
just,
go ahead.
yes, yeah. Oh, I thought I did. I thought I had some, I'm sorry, I don't have any context for this. It might be for the next agenda item.
No problem. Do we just want to jump into the presentation?
Sure, please.
Okay. Eric, go ahead. I'll put you on the clock for 10 minutes.
All right, great. So as you'll kind of see through this existing site survey here, the intent of this portion is just to demolish all the existing structures on site. I went through one by one to just kind of catalog what's existing, but really the problem that we're running into is just the size of and the arrangement of the existing structures prohibit the development of a new convenience store and gas station that meet all the needs and amenities that we really want to see in a new gas station. So, I mean, I'm not sure how much we want to dwell on each one of these buildings, but essentially we're increasing the amount of pump stations, we're adding a car wash, and we're adding a convenience.
Sorry, Eric, can I interrupt? This item is really just talking about the existing structures and the demolition. If there's any significance architecturally, we're not focused at all on what you'll be putting in its place.
That's correct. I was just kind of giving the rationale for why we've decided
Sure.
that
Okay.
this is kind of necessary. Essentially, it boils down to trying to work with the existing architecture was not going to utilize the existing structures very well. But yeah, we can just go through these existing structures on site. So what I've highlighted on that site plan at the top left corner on this sheet is just the existing pump station structure. We do not have an exact date on its construction, but based off the aerial images, we were estimating it was probably early 70s, perhaps late 60s. So it would fall under that protected category of being over 50 years old. If you go to the next slide, we're looking at the existing gas station structure. So we have some exterior photos here, and on the next slide, some photos are able to get of the interior. You can see from the construction, it was just primarily CMU block with like a wooden roof structure above there. Again, it's an interesting building, but given the needs of what we were trying to put in, we weren't really able to find a way to successfully utilize this existing structure. Go to the next slide, please. So the existing 2-story brick structure, I believe it was used for offices prior to the change in ownership. This one looks like it may have been built in the late 60s, early 70s as well, but we do not have an exact date on this one.
If I could interject, we did look at the historic aerials for a lot of these, which do go back to 1957. And we believe that this structure was present before 1957.
Okay, yeah, I was under the impression this two-story structure and the existing gas station were the oldest structures on site, aside from the one on 350 Folly Road, which we'll get to. If you go to the next slide, you could just see some of the interior photos. It's kind of hard to tell, but that photo on the bottom right, I was trying to get to see what it was made of. It looks like it was just a CMU two-story structure with a wooden roof system above. Go to the next slide. This is a prefabricated metal shed building. I didn't really find anything in this structure that really warranted any architectural merit. And then the next structure, please, or next slide. It's the existing laundromat facility. Essentially, it's a CMU box with some early storefront on that front end there. If you go to the next slide, you could kind of see some interior photos and some photos of the existing roof structure outbound of the storefront there. I mean, while architecturally a little bit interesting, I would say it just has not really weathered very well. If you go to the next slide. So this is probably what I believe might be the oldest structure on site. It was probably built as a residential structure, but was being used for a business for some time. We have some interior photos on the next slide. You can see there are some portions that were framed out of CMU there, and then it's on a wooden crawl space, the wooden roof structure system. Again, it's unfortunate that the building's kind of gone into a state of disrepair, but really the reason why we're trying to demo these is to utilize the site in the most efficient way, what we believe will deliver a better architectural solution. Go to next slide. It would be the last building here that we're asking for demo permission for. So one story CMU shed structure built behind that residential looking structure at 350 Folly Road. If you go to the next slide, you could kind of see there's that outbound shed structure on the north side of that property that's obviously seen better days. I just didn't find anything worth saving with most of these buildings, which makes us feel a little bit more comfortable approaching you guys for demolition approval. If you have any questions regarding perhaps some reasons in the civil side of things of why we needed to utilize the full site, I mean, I guess that would tie into our next presentations, but Michael will be available for those types of questions as well.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions from the board? Any questions?
I have one, Erica, Kristen Krause. Do you know, Eric, if the dry cleaners was actually doing chemicals on site, or was that just a drop off and then it went somewhere else? Or do you know what the environmental report is on that?
I do not have that information, and I believe we're still waiting on some geotechnical reports for this site.
Okay, thank you. That's all of my questions.
Any other questions? We do have two members of the public registered. I'm not sure if they are wanting to speak on the demo or the new application. So David, if you don't mind clarifying. I assume
yeah.
Katie Zimmerman probably wants to comment on the new proposal, but I'm not sure about Joe Rosito.
Yeah, let me let him in 1 second, please. My guess is it was also on the new structure, but Joe, you should be able to speak now. Were you wanting to speak on the demo or on the new proposal? Joe, can you hear me? Let's see.
There's another Joe Rosito in the attendees. Looks like there's two of him.
Oh, okay.
Hey, can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Thanks. Working with two audio systems here. I really appreciate you all letting me speak, but yeah, I'll hold off my comments for the second line item.
Okay, great, thank you. So with no public comment on the demo, David, if you could give staff recommendations, please.
Sure, thank you, Erica. The ordinance that discusses demolition in purview of the Design Review Board states that the board should consider the following: the architectural and aesthetic features of the structure, the nature and quality of the structure, including its architectural fabric, any historical significance, the nature and quality of the surrounding area, and the structure's contribution to the overall streetscape of the area. Staff has examined the above considerations when contemplating demo for all of the structures on these parcels. We feel that these structures have little architectural merit or historical value. That, along with the condition of the structures, staff recommends approval of demolition.
Thanks, David. Board discussion in the motion.
Erica, I walked it with staff and have some history with all these structures, I guess, except for the home. And yeah, there's really nothing of any importance of any of these structures. If everybody else is okay, I would like to make a motion for approval of the demolition of these.
Okay, great. Andy has a motion for approval. Is there a second?
I second it.
I'll
Dino's.
second. Oh, go ahead.
All right, Dina says the second. I'll now call roll. Kristen,
Yes, in favor.
Jeff,
Yes, in favor.
Aaron,
Yes, in favor.
and then I am also yes in favor. So we will now move on to item number 3, which is the 334 Folly Road, requesting conceptual approval for a new gas station, car wash, and store. We obviously know the context on this, so Eric, if you would like to jump into your second presentation, I will put you on the clock for 10 minutes unless you need more.
I don't think I'll need more, but I will say we'll get started probably with the civils. That would be Michael. I know, I think we have a couple of civil sheets to review. I think that would be the existing survey, so we'll start on that next sheet. Or, yeah.
You want me to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Okay. Appreciate y'all's time. This is Michael McCormick. I'm with McCormick and Associates in Mount Pleasant, the civil engineer for the development. What we have is the structure is around 4,900 feet. We located it on the corner of the property, trying to be as pedestrian friendly as we can. With the siting of the building in the corner, obviously dictated the adjacent parking and also the gasoline canopy with the car wash in the rear. What we've tried to do is provide ample green space around the property on both sides of the property, to the residences on Tatum Street and the commercial side on Folly. Ongoing coordination right now on my end is coordination with the county guys that are building their 12-foot pedestrian pathway down the frontage on Folly Road and tying it into the property in front of McLeod Plantation going down to the country club. So all of that's being coordinated now. We've got some handicap access issues that we've got to look into and figure out when we get into the details of it, the fine details of it. The way, the brief history of the submittals, we've had one pre-app with City TRC, one conceptual TRC application. We're due in front of BOZA site design for 3 tree removals next month. And that's where we stand today. As far as the other engineering plans, what you have minus some minor details is a full set of site construction drawings. And I've taken them as far as I could for this level of submittal. Also, full landscape plans there at the end as well to give you what the landscape architect has chosen for species and things like that. That's pretty much it. It's trying to keep it as simple as possible.
I'll jump in here. David, can you quickly go to slide, I think 86 should be that landscape plan on your presentation.
Just so you know, it's no longer those numbers that you submitted because it's combined with the other.
Correct. I think it might be 86 on the combined.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that might give some context to what Michael was discussing. Oh. So you can see we're really trying to situate the building towards the corner of Folly and Tatum Street, still providing a landscape buffer on all sides of the property. But you can see kind of why we need to demo the building just to get all the drive aisles far away from the intersection, while also provide some landscape buffers to beautify the site there. But I guess I'll jump into the architectural side. If you go forward to 2 sheets there. So this is our floor plans kind of oriented. So the plan south would be Tatum Street, and then plan east would be Folly Road. So what you'd be seeing above the floor plan there would be the pump station. So I mean, it's a pretty typical gas station convenience store arrangement on the plan there, with trying to keep as much glass open to the pump station side, but also trying our best to activate all sides of the building. So you'll see along Tatum Street, which would be planned south, and along the drive aisle, access from Tatum Street, which would be planned west, we're adding a porch that could be used for people getting takeout food or just wanting to relax, and also helping to bring down the scale of building as it reaches the street. We have our whole construction set as part of this presentation, so I'll ask you to just skip ahead a couple sheets to page 94, the PDF. So we'll get into the elevations. Thank you. So that bottom elevation is what you'd be seeing from the pump station side. So that would be the south side, and the elevation on the upper half of that sheet is the elevation that is facing Folly Road, which will have a landscape buffer in front of it. You'll see on that left side of the Folly Road elevation is the end of like the porch structure that would wrap the entirety of the north and west facades. Really, the architectural language that we're trying to employ here was inspired by just a more residential look of a low country style, while also trying to utilize durable materials that would be pretty maintenance free and just blend in pretty seamlessly. Trying to be considerate of the mixed residential and commercial nature of this part of James Island. Also trying to bring down the scale a little bit and add some architectural features on all the different facades. If you jump to the next sheet there, David, we'll see the elevation on the bottom half of the sheet there is what you would see from Tatum Street. Like I said, we're bringing in that porch structure just to help bring down the scale of the building to the street. And then that elevation on the top half of that sheet is what you'd see from the drive aisle if you access the property from Tatum Street in a vehicle. really trying to bring in some more traditional, more just contextual materials and building elements to here. We were trying to avoid having a very modern or very stark gas station. I mean, we realized that we're kind of at the end of Tatum Street there, capping off a residential street, but also meeting up with some commercial properties along Folly Road. And then if you skip to slide 111, David, that brings us to our rendered views here. So it might be kind of hard to see at this scale, at least for me, because I have bad eyes, but on the top left is what existing. I highlighted in red the existing structures that would be removed. This view here, it's really kind of meant for just illustrative purposes only, but as you could see, if we flip back to the landscape plan later, we're bringing that building much closer to the corner of the street. If you go to the next slide, please. This is looking from the northwest corner of the property. So this would be what you'd see coming down Tatum Street towards Folly Road. Once again, we're adding that porch element just to help bring down the scale and add some visual interest. And then the next slide. So this is what you'd be seeing if you're going northbound on Folly Road towards West Ashley and downtown. We think we're adding some architectural elements that are translated through to the experience of the building. That Claire's story will be exposed on the interior of the convenience store portion of this project. And we really are trying to mix up some of the material palette so it doesn't look monolithic, but also trying to be sensitive to the site here and all of its context. I believe we have another.
No, that was it.
Oh, that's it. Okay. Yeah, and I guess I'll reserve any other time for questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
I've got one. Could I jump in?
Sure.
Please.
I had a question about the elevation change from the existing sidewalks to the finished floor. It looks like it's roughly 2 feet. And I see how you're routing in the sidewalk for handicap accessibility. And I believe you're bringing it in a long ways to make up the grade. So I was just wondering if you anticipated the use of any retaining walls between the existing sidewalk and the
Perhaps. What I drew right there is a series of just handicap ramps coming up at 8% over 12 feet, I think it is. It's a code, like three series of ramps that would ramp up to the building and get into the building. Keep in mind that, I mean, all of this is conceptual. I mean, Eric Schultz made a good point that having us take a look at it adjacent to the building as a feature, and that's something we need to discuss as a design team. But yeah, there is a little grade differential there. You're right, and that's details we've got to work out between us as far as what's accessible and what isn't required to be accessible.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one question regarding the porch that's on the north side. It seems like a lot of that's concrete, kind of a wide walkway around the building. And I guess the question is it a programmatic requirement to have outdoor seating? Or was it an architectural solution to soften the building along Tatum? Just kind of curious.
It was primarily driven as an architectural solution to kind of soften that edge. I mean, we do foresee maybe some people using that, but primarily was driven as a architectural solution.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
I know I have a question. I'm not sure. There's Eric, thank you. And I was particularly impressed with just the interest and enthusiasm you had with regards to the demo and your knowledge of the building. So thank you so much for that. Y'all have gone to a great extent, and I don't know if this is an appropriate question, Madam Chairman, so if you want me to shut up, I will. As far as the submission is concerned, this is not a prototype design, I would assume. Is that correct?
It is a prototype design that we're adapting on a site-by-site basis. But it was primarily driven as a prototype design for the Charleston region as the region expands.
May I ask you, within a few hundred feet is one of the more historic structures on James Island. Was there no sense of contextual reference in regards to McLeod Plantation and what has become really one of the more significant and symbolic structures on James Island?
I can't say with any honesty that we drew direct inspiration from McLeod Plantation, but I mean, again, we're looking at other structures in the Low Country to help derive this prototype model for the region.
The canopy that you show, obviously there's no fenestration in the wall. I'm assuming all of, looking at the floor plan, it's all service. How do you feel this canopy will be used, or the seating area? Will there be tables out here? Are there, looks like there's ceiling fans, but Jeff asked a very interesting question about programmatic. Was this an element that was added? For what reason, I guess, is what I'm asking you.
When we went through the prototyping design, we kind of made an effort to engage all four facades. At a couple of sites where we've used a similar model, we're kind of surrounded on all four sides by either parking or other site features. So we have been using tables outside of there that we haven't specified for this submission, but I guess it does lead to a question of whether it's necessary being up against Skating Street there.
I'm just struggling visually and programmatically, its relationship. But anyway, I'll save those comments for the board. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? With none, we will open it up for public. Go ahead, Jeff.
I have one more question. I think Michael touched on it. You had mentioned something about a 12-foot walkway. Is that the Rethink Folly multi-use path?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong. You said that was a comment from TRC that you are incorporating or will incorporate, but this set does not yet incorporate.
Exactly right. What we're doing is the end of the walk is across the street at Tatum, and we are going to put in a crosswalk, continue that path with a ADA structure or ADA ramp at the corner, and then continue that 12-foot path all the way to the property line across the frontage.
Super. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes.
If I could add one other thing regarding the multi-use path. DRB does have the ability to reduce the required width of 12 feet. There's some other locations such as the Publix that we let them go down to 8 feet based on various constraints they had.
Well, to that end, does the applicant have any constraints to require a reduction? It doesn't appear that way.
That gets a little tied up in the corner, but I don't think it's anything that can't be worked out.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now open it up for public comments. Joe Rosito is the first registered member of the public to speak.
Well, hopefully my audio is working now, and I hope you
It
all can hear
is.
me.
We can, thank you.
Thank you all for letting me speak, and I'll be fairly brief. You know, I think my comments are likely going to be somewhat obvious, being the only neighbor that's adjacent to this property. So on one hand, while I feel, you know, I think it's positive to see this cleaned up and the demolition, it will be welcomed in some sense. My biggest concern around this is that is the noise and the light that comes along with these type of things, going from a fairly quiet gas station that was there and you know, didn't bother us too much, and being a first-time homeowner, I just want to see, you know, my home property, as well as just the, you know, the living experience that we have here, affected as little as possible. So I say that, and I just ask that be a consideration in when we look at the landscaping along our fence and what we can do to absolutely minimize light and noise. So that's really my only comment that I wanted to get across to the board. And then secondarily, you know, when I see some of these larger gas stations around town, the trash associated with them, the things that can be left along the road, we already have somewhat of a problem with that along Tatum Street. People coming down our road and dropping trash in the ditches. And so I wonder, or maybe it's a question to the board or to the architects here in the refuel station, as to what might be done to clean up those areas and the things that get thrown in the woods and the surrounding areas. So that's really all I have for the board, and just ask that we can do the best we can to buffer us from this larger gas station.
Thank you. And sorry, would you mind saying your name and address for the record?
Yeah, absolutely. It's Joe Rosito, and I'm 1637 Tatum Street.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
Katie Zimmerman.
Hello again. Katie Zimmerman, Executive Director of Charleston Moves. And thank you for asking that clarifying question about the 12-foot multi-use path. That was going to be one of my comments. And that I just want to reiterate how important that is, and not to negotiate down in width. What happened in front of Publix was incredibly disappointing. It's not a real multi-use path when it's only 8 feet on one side of the road. So want to make sure this parcel has plenty of space to do the minimum, which is 12 feet. And so that's incredibly important for Rethink Folly Road, which the steering committee already has tool design that laid out the design standards for what multi-use paths should look like along Folly Road for all levels of government that are in charge of it. That's something that's really non-negotiable at this point, given how dangerous Folly Road is. I also want to ask, I really appreciate that the design includes a sidewalk for the parcel's frontage along Tatum. To the best of the developer and designer's ability, if you could, I heard you say that you're working on a crosswalk across Tatum. As you all know, a pedestrian was killed at this crossing Folly Road to get to Tatum a month ago. There are no crosswalks or pedestrian signals at this intersection now. I recognize a crosswalk is off the parcel, but whatever can be done to set up a crosswalk for success, or even if the developer is willing to also work with the city and the state on a crossing over Folly between this parcel and the barbecue across the street, that would be wonderful and would help us reduce our terrible standing as far as pedestrian fatalities go in the nation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Public comment period is closed. David, staff recommendations, please.
Sure, thank you. Staff likes the proposed store is at the corner up towards the street intersection. We were wondering if it was possible to rotate the building so the longer side faces Folly Road, which would shield more of the parked cars from Folly Road. Number 2, staff likes the interesting design of the gas canopy. Number 3, no details were provided for the gas canopy. We would like to see elevations and details of the canopy. Let me get to number 4. Staff has issues with the car wash that has the open end of the tunnel towards Folly Road and nowhere to place a brick screen wall that we would normally ask for to screen the opening of the car wash tunnel from the street. Staff recommends rotating the tunnel so that rotating the structure so that the longer side of the building faces Folly, or if possible, place the building in a location other than the driveway entry. So you'd be able to use a screen wall to help screen it. Number 5, I brought up these images, some other prototypes that were used. And I did want to state that DRB discourages the use of prototype buildings and encourages applicants to do something unique and site specific. Now you can see this is the structure at, this is the refuel at Daniel Island. And you know what works on Daniel Island may not work on Folly Road. And then here's the pretty much exact building that they're proposing for this site. There is a refuel prototype I did see when we were going through these images that we felt we liked a little better than the current proposal. This just has more of a low country feel. And we felt this was a little more appropriate for the site. So on to the next one, number 7. Staff's initial impression was to deny this building design due to its design style and it being a repeat design done elsewhere. But we also think if this building design were tweaked, it could work. Staff does not care for the brick end walls or the entry tower. They look applied and give a bookend effect. Let me bring up here's the proposed image. I just zoomed in on their perspectives. Let's see. If the brick ends were removed, I feel the building design could be worked with if reskinned, possibly keep the brick water table if it would go all the way around the building. Currently, the water table is only partially around the building. Number 8, the colors as seen in this existing store. Let me go back to this one. The colors as seen in this existing store seem to look too dark and monochromatic. If gray is one of the branding colors for refuel, staff asked the applicant to study a way to introduce complementing and contrasting colors so it's not so monochromatic. The introduction of other materials would also be a way of adding some color change. Staff recommends the roof also be a contrasting color as well. Trim elements could also be used as contrasting color. And then going back to the images submitted by the applicant, the computer 3D perspective renderings provided staff feels hurt the cause more than it helps. Please provide 3D renderings that have some closer views of the buildings, a more accurate representation of how the structures sit on the site in relationship to Folly Road. You know, it just, you know, as you stated, it just looks so far away from Folly Road. Doesn't look accurate at all. More views are needed to study the site and the relationships of the building versus asphalt paving versus green space to an accurate scale. Starting to show landscape and grade changes in 3D will also help the presentation and the understanding of the site. Let me bring up one more. This is an exhibit I put together. Staff asked the applicant to provide a screen wall of brick or some other material between the public streets and the asphalt areas and parking. Typically, we ask for a screen wall to be placed in a location to be able to have landscaping on the street side of the wall. This exhibit I put together is where the red would be where we would ask for a minimum 3'6" screen wall. And then the green I have up here in the corner is just a suggestion for a retaining wall that could just stop a little bit above grade. And then maybe that would change the layout of the long sidewalks as an approach to the building. Number 11, regarding the civil sheet site details, all traffic signs on your property must have a wood or metal decorative signpost painted black or Charleston green. Stop signs, if in the right of way, must remain the U-channel breakaway post. But all the other signs on the property must be the decorative post. Number 12, the roof access ladder is on the side of the building facing Folly. Staff asked the applicant to relocate this ladder on the opposite side of the building from Folly Road. 13, the support columns for the exterior porch look as if they could be thickened. At this scale, visually, they look too thin to support the porch. Also study a brick base that matches the brick used for the gas canopy columns, and consider a brick base for these columns as well. Number 14, we noticed this Dogwood Park pillar at the corner. Staff suggests getting in touch with the Dogwood Park Neighborhood Association and talk to them about how you can incorporate the existing Dogwood Park sign that sits at the intersection. Staff suggests incorporating it into the wall design that we are asking the applicant to do. And then lastly, number 15, staff recommends burying the electric lines and removing the electric poles. Staff does recommend deferral for the project.
Thanks, David. Eric, do you have any response to either David's staff comments or public comments, or any clarifications that you would like to make?
I will say that the staff comments are duly noted, and we'll be working to try to find a solution, makes everyone here happy. And as far as the public comments, well, we've been working, or the ownership team, I should say, has been working with the neighbor to help figure out a landscaping buffer that everyone could be happy with, and maybe helping select plants that they have chosen as long as they meet the buffer requirements. And as far as the trash on the site, I mean, we can work to provide conveniently located trash cans, but aside from that, I'm not really sure if that's really in our control.
Sure.
But yeah, that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. We are now in board discussion and a motion.
I have one question, perhaps the applicant can answer. It's relative to Joe's, the neighbor comment. And maybe if the applicant knows this, is there a fence between this property and his property?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What kind of fence is it?
It's wooden. It's about, don't hold me to it, but I think it's 8 feet tall at least. I'm 6 feet and it's over my head.
Okay.
But it runs almost the entire length of his property, and from last time I was out there.
Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Sure.
Is that an existing fence?
Yes. That's
It
what.
is.
That's
And-
what my
Yes,
question
it
was.
is.
And what condition is that in?
It probably needs some upkeep.
Can we, while we're talking about that, can we flip to the landscape plan just so we can kind of see that treatment of that property line better?
Let me know if you want me to zoom in on anything.
Yeah, I think so. It would be helpful just on that property line. And I assume that is the existing fence that's showing up there.
Oh, yeah.
So it looks like all of the plantings are on the gas station side of the fence, but the fence is on the neighbor's property, is that right?
if I may jump in, it is on my property.
Okay.
And it's in the front half here on the north facing section. It's a 5-foot fence. And then it does go up to, it's a 7 or 8 foot fence back to the newest property that they just purchased, just back by the car wash there.
Okay, thank you.
This is Dinos. David, I think staff comments are right on. I mean, an excellent job in putting things together. I do believe that dealing with prototypes is so difficult, and I know that there's still a physical difference or distance between the two. But one of the things that struck me is the importance of reference to significant buildings in areas like James Island, where there's minimal reference and suburban sprawl. And I know we've talked about this as a board in the past, and when you're so close to a structure and a site as McLeod Plantation, and to really ignore its presence, I think is short-sighted and really needs to be taken into account. I mean, even I don't have any problems with the monochromatic aspect, but I think that the direction on the color is, for instance, on the building is the wrong direction as far as the way it might be presented. I agree that there is a possibility that by removing the bookends, the masonry bookends, and even the center. Can you go to the rendering again, please, David? I'm sorry.
That's right. I've got some blow-ups.
Yes, sir. The blow-ups would be nice there. Even the signage on the center, or the square projection, masonry projection, there's a way to simplify this. And I think that when I make the reference to McLeod Plantation, it's the simplicity of the architecture that's worth noting, and just the manner that it's presented. I struggle. I mean, I also would love to see the building turned so that the long portion faces Folly Road, but then you're putting a blank wall on Folly Road. And I think in this instance, there's no transparency to the building, and it would be very difficult to be able to address that. So consequently, maybe the orientation holding down this corner is appropriate. But I struggle with the colonnade, the canopy to the rear, just purely from a functional standpoint. And I think that the building can be made simpler by virtue of eliminating that and looking at how the service side of the building responds to the overall architecture. It's almost taking on an interesting component of a form, maybe with some restudy of, well, anyway, I don't know how appropriate that is, but I do think simplifying it would be a great direction to go in terms of continuing evolution of the design process.
This porch makes very little sense over here, and it needs to respond to the site and how with the site, this particular site orientation. I was wondering if we can go back to the plan. And Aaron, did you have any other comments on the site plan?
Yeah, I do, but I'll let you finish your thoughts.
Okay, well, that we can go to that same landscape plan perhaps. Yep, if you can zoom in on the corner, that'd be good. I will wonder, and this is a time to spitball and just test ideas, but I wonder, could this building shift back to the east and create a courtyard space in between the building and Folly, and that could be part of the retaining wall or a site wall. If we're going to entertain the idea of people sitting here, then put them where it makes sense.
Well, Jeff, if I may, I think that, if we're going going to entertain the idea of keeping the building there. I think that somehow it needs to structurally anchor to Folly or that corner somehow. I mean, when I say structurally, you
Yeah.
know, I entertain a seating area or something, but I think it needs to have some sort of element to it, you know, not just a low wall,
Right.
or, you know what, just something that makes that bit, you know, makes how it addresses the corner mean something more than just,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then that can be a start of how it contains the site between itself and Folly Road. If I'm making myself clear, I think that it's,
Yeah.
I struggle all, you know, with this. Once again, we have a building that doesn't, you know, there's more detail, but it just really doesn't relate to the site. There's really no elegant solutions that are presented. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just, you know.
I think holding the corner is important. I just think this porch over here that wraps the building is misplaced. It would be better if it were a porch element here on Frawley that would address that multi-use path. I hear
agree
saying.
totally.
Yeah. I agree with I shadow Dinos's words. I think the staff comments are right on. I wonder the color palette, the editing of some of the brick elements, the color palette that might speak more to the simplicity of the McLeod plantation structures. Just that alone would be a dramatic improvement. Not sure the canopy fits the building design. I like it, but it seems a little incongruent in my opinion.
Possibly if it were on the front.
You mean rotated? Oh yeah, yeah. I know this element we're just talking about on the front of the building. Yeah. I think this is what Michael was talking about too, but a more integrated approach on how you get up to the site is needed. That front corner landscape solution. I'm not a landscape architect, but it seems a little seems like it's more of a joining solution than it is a corner solution. I don't know how to say it any other way than that. The landscaping at the corner.
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry, Aaron, you were going to have comments. It seems like it's a whole new site design.
I know, and part of my hesitation for speaking up is that I do have many comments on the landscape plan, but if we're suggesting, you know, a full reorientation and restructuring of the site, then I don't know how much it's worth commenting on individual landscape details, but I will say, you know, similar to what Dinos and Jeff said, that I appreciate, David, all of your comments. I can tell you went over this very thoroughly and had a lot of great and thoughtful suggestions. But I will say that, you know, the thing obviously as a landscape architect that seemed to be missing from some of your comments was just addressing the landscape. And I think, you know, the issue here, I don't know the right way to say it eloquently, and Andy, feel free to join in, but I would say that if we're providing
You're looking at me for elegance.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think Andy's the guy that's going to correct your eloquence.
Andy, eloquence, oh, okay.
If you're looking for the blunt side of an axe, yeah, that's me.
Well, I'll say that I think, you know, just so that we can provide some constructive criticism for the landscape plan as well, because it's not just, okay, let's redo the site plan and then adjust the landscape plan to fit. I think overall, the landscape plan as it's presented here is a bit kind of cluttered and I don't know, the fragmented, like it doesn't seem to be a unifying kind of plan and concept. And I think it needs to respond to the site better. It needs to respond to the building better. And it needs to kind of tie together where it seems like each kind of part was designed as like a little piecemeal thing, that I think that they need a more cohesive overall landscape plan that really does, you know, address the unique situation of the site and the building.
You hit it right on the nail right on the head. Simplify. I think that is, as you're simplifying the building, you can simplify the landscape. I would suggest, and I'm not going to go species by species at this level, but I think that really examining the species that are presented and would really help you. I think some elegant solutions with your access once you've sited your building, I think would really help. And having the landscape work with these access ways rather than these straight lines with ramps, I think would really help. I mean, curves create distance. So, those are things that you can look at. I am a little concerned with things like the dumpster facing with the gates towards Folly Road. Those gates tend to be left open from time to time, and you can see right into that dumpster area. I am a little concerned with the car wash facing with its open mouth towards Folly Road. I just really think that there's a lot of progress that needs to be made before we're comfortable with a conceptual approval, or at least I'm comfortable for the conceptual approval. I don't want to speak for anybody else.
I think the outdoor spaces that you're talking about, like potentially shifting that porch area, engaging the multi-use path, those should be designed not just as an architecture piece, but coherently landscape architecture and architecture kind of informing each other and creating an outdoor space. Instead of, architecture and then just come put some bushes around it. I want to make sure that they're designed cohesively.
That's correct.
I'm looking at go ahead. Looking at the floor plan here, it might work to flip the floor plan if we're going to shift the building to the east. If you flip the floor plan, they'd have the kitchen and the restaurant activating Folly. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, and also engaging your edges instead of it, just being, something was hammered into me is that nature abhors a straight line. And we have a lot of straight lines in the landscape and the site plan let's use the landscape to soften your edges. And I think, as Aaron says, and I think we've said it on many projects, is the landscape's not an afterthought. The landscape is part of your design solution, and your building needs to work with the landscape and vice versa.
David, I'm just curious. You indicated that there was the initial reaction was for denial, and sometimes denial best serves the applicant. What convinced you otherwise?
Well, I was looking at the building they submitted, and I was envisioning the brick end walls coming off and changing some colors, and I thought maybe deferral would possibly be okay as well if we wanted to work with the building that they submitted. But I agree, if maybe it's not my place to say now, but
No, I understand.
no.
I'm just wondering if it might provide Eric more possibilities in dealing with his client to get a much stronger and better solution that's applicable to the site.
So is there a motion?
Are we in board discussion right now?
Yes.
Yeah, we just gave, so between us, we just gave them full approval to tear down everything. So you have a clean palette. Why not go back to starting with that clean palette?
That's a great point, Kristen. Well, again, I think we know the wonderful aspect of all of this is knowing the quality, the design quality of this firm, the applicant, and knowing that they have significant capabilities of addressing this based upon everything that we've said. I mean, I know it's late. I feel that it might give them more leverage if we move to deny the application. I will move to deny the application on the basis that this new structure in proximity to a very historic setting needs to be much more responsive in terms of its architecture, and specifically speaking towards simplicity of expression, and especially its reference in relationship to Folly Road.
Can you slow down and say that one more time, Dino? Sorry.
Sorry, boy, I was on a roll.
You were. I got about a third of it.
I'm sorry.
It's like a phone number. You got to get it all out at once.
Yeah. And then asking to repeat it. And
Yes, that's quite all right. I don't possess the eloquence of Andy, so just bear with me for a moment and I will get there. That we ask the applicant to go back and look at the local historic references in terms of of the simplicity of its architecture. Number two would be to reevaluate the site in terms of the placement of the car wash and all the issues, items 1 through 15 that staff noted.
We want to include staff comments also, Dino?
I guess that would be good. I'm struggling with staff comment number 8. I don't think necessarily a monochromatic structure is a bad decision if there's a strong relationship to again what we're talking about of keeping a very simple solution. So unless the board disagrees, I mean, specifically what I wrote is 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, and 15.
So no, just to make sure I'm clear, we're excluding 2, 6, 8, and 13.
And 13, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you have a motion for denial with staff comments 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9 through 12, 14, and 15. And board comments based on the proximity to McLeod Plantation to be more responsive to the simplicity of the architecture, and 2, to reevaluate the site design.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a second?
I'll second this, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. I will now call roll. Jeff?
Yes, in favor.
Kristen?
Yes, in favor.
Aaron?
Yes, in favor.
And then I am also yes in favor. And now we will move on to our last item, which is the approval of the meeting minutes from March 1st, I believe.
Move to approve.
Does Andy?
Move to approve.
Yeah.
And Kristen, are you seconding it?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Call roll. Dinos?
Aye, yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Thank you. And I am also yes in favor. And we are done. Thank y'all.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Bye, you guys.
Yep.
Can't wait to
See you
meet.
later.
Love to see you guys.
Thank you.
Bye,
Good meeting.
everyone.
Thanks.
See you guys soon.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.